Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Ant Marino Podcast. Happy New Year. It's a bloody new year. Wow, 2021. What a year. Super crazy for me. Not as in crazy as in like exciting because, well, it was exciting in some ways, but I didn't really do a lot because we were so locked down. And I didn't get to do a lot of the stuff that I wanted to do during the year. So it was a bit shit in that regard, but it was exciting because there was a lot of personal growth for me. I hope you guys had a great year too. Now getting into 2022, it's that time of year where people are setting New Year's resolutions, and I've set a few for myself, and one of them is to quit dairy. And this is probably going to be a really hard one for me because I like ice cream and I like cheese. So I'm okay with the milk. I'm okay with cutting out milk because I have done that for years now. But the ice cream and the cheese, and the chocolate. Don't forget the chocolate. Bloody hell. I'm going to have a hard time kicking that, I reckon. But it is one of my things that I wanted to do. And if you follow me on Instagram, you would have seen that yesterday, which was New Year's Day, I started the New Year's resolution of not having dairy, and the universe was trying to test me and see if I really, really wanted to stick to this New Year's resolution. Because I went down the street and I got an iced chai latte, and had oat milk in it, which I would have done anyway. And when I got it, it came with ice cream in it. Now I'm not sure what type of ice cream it was. I didn't ask, but I assumed it would be just normal vanilla, ice cream made out of cow's milk or made out of dairy, whatever. And I didn't ask for it, so I was like, fuck. And I'm looking at it, I'm going, I could easily eat that or drink that with this drink right now. And I'm like, oh, universe, you're trying to bloody test me. So what I had to do was pull the ice cream out and throw it in a bush down the street so I wouldn't eat it. And I believe that takes a lot of self-discipline. And not self-discipline, it's like, that military style discipline of, if you fucking have that, you're a fucking piece of shit. Wow, this podcast is explicit already. But you know what I mean? Like, hammering people, using shame to produce motivation and all that kind of stuff. Not that kind of self-discipline, it's self-love. So it is showing up for yourself and not doing something or doing something that is in your best interest or for your best good. So for me, I was, it's self-love, but it's kind of disguised with self-discipline. So I had to have the self-discipline to pull that ice cream out and throw it in the bush and not drink it. But in actual fact, it's self-love because I'm choosing to not eat dairy, and I had to choose in that moment to throw it in the bush and show up for myself. So showing up for myself is self-love, right? It looks like self-discipline, but it's actually self-love. So I just wanted to touch on that at the start of this podcast because I know people are, starting to set New Year's resolutions, and maybe you've set them in the past and you've failed, or, because things have gotten too hard, or you've had no help, or whatever it may be. So I wanted to just give that little bit of a tip. And also, if you were wanting to explore how to get your New Year's resolutions to stick for good, so those attempts are not failed anymore, and you can actually be that person that makes a change in their life and continues, sets that New Year's resolution and sticks to it, and whatever habits you want, creating new habits and all that kind of thing. If you want to learn more about that, well, I've just launched my habit creating course, and in this course, you're going to learn all about the tools and the techniques and the mindset to make these habits and these resolutions stick for good, right? So in this course, it's 4 weeks long. We spend 4 weeks together. There is 4 weekly, live interactive calls on Zoom. So in this course, I'll be there, the whole time, not holding your hand, but being there to answer questions and to coach you in a live setting. Whereas a lot of other courses you sign up to them and, you do them at your own pace, which can be good, but also if you are trying to set a New Year's resolution and stick to it, and you have trouble showing up for yourself by just doing the thing by yourself, and you need other people around you to help you, to keep you motivated, to support you and all that kind of thing, then it's better to do a course where it's a live interactive thing, because there's something inside of you that goes, well, I have to show up now because, there's somebody relying on me to show up. And, whatever it might be that goes on in your mind that says, I want to show up because, it's way better to be there with somebody else. And I know when I do show up with somebody else on a call, then it's more motivating and inspiring, and also hearing a lot of other people's outcomes and points of view and all that kind of stuff. Then it's easier to show up on that call as opposed to, doing a course where it's led at your own kind of pace. And that's what I found with me anyway. And a lot of people I've spoken to, they also have that trouble. So that's part of the course as well. You'll be able to join a free private Facebook group where the community that is in the course are going to be a part of that, where we're going to share our wins and our challenges. And then it'll be a place where I will be checking in with everybody daily to help keep people on track, because I think community is a huge thing, and having like a hype tribe around you to support you through this. Some people like to call it accountability, and I kind of like the support thing of it. So yeah, it's going to be that, and then you're going to have daily check-ins, weekly lessons, and also there's some bonuses involved, which are I'll be sending the recordings to you of all the recordings, so that you can then go back and look at them throughout the rest of your life. If you want to, if you've forgotten something, or you remember hearing something in that call and you want to go back to it, then you've got that material there to go back to for life. So you can keep that material there to help you win throughout any other habits and resolutions you want to change in the future. And also there will be a free follow-up live Q&A session a month after completing the course. So it'll be, a check-in to see how everyone's going, sharing wins and challenges and anything else that, might come up that you want to share. And also there'll be an opportunity to be able to be, coached through any troubles that you are going through. So if you like the sound of this and you're still kind of wondering is this course for me? Well, this course is for people that, can't seem to start a new habit or New Year's resolution, or they start a new habit or New Year's resolution for a little bit and then it drops off. I'm sure a lot of people can vibe with that. Or this is for you if you believe you can't stick to things. You always find an excuse to why you didn't keep the habit or resolution going. You are sick of feeling like a failure. You have tried other motivational things and it hasn't worked. You look up to people that can start and follow through with a new habit and resolution, and you want to be like them. You've had enough and just want serious change. You want to become that person that can stick to their new habits and resolutions and have people look up to you for help. And you want to learn the tools and techniques and the mindset to make your new habit or New Year's resolution stick for good. So if this sounds like something that you want to get into, then I will leave a link in the bio for more information and also where you can sign up to the course. And this course basically has $1,500 worth of value in it for the price of $299, right? And there's also an early bird pricing that is going to be ending on January 5th, right? So the course is starting January 10th. The early bird pricing finishes January 5th. So when this is going out, it is actually January the 2nd. So you only have a few days to get in there. And also for my podcast listeners, because I love you guys so much, I've also got a discount code for you. So it's a 20% discount code. And when you're at checkout, all you have to do to redeem this code is enter the code podcast20. So if you want to join this course and you want to change 2022, I hope I've been saying 2022 this whole time, not 2021. Anyway, if you want to make serious change in your life this year and you want to set these New Year's resolutions and these habits and make them stick for good, then sign up today. Remember, the early bird price is finishing January 5th, and the podcast code is podcast20, which you can use at checkout to redeem 20% off both prices. So if you don't get in before January 5th, you can still buy the course, which is heavily packed full of value at $299. You can still use the code podcast20 at the checkout. So anyway, enough of that. No, not enough of that. I would bloody love to see you in the course. That's the last thing that I want to say. I would love to be there and help you, set those new habits and resolutions and help you make them stick for good. All I want to see in the world is success with people, whatever that looks like. It can be small, it can be large, whatever it is. I just want to see and I want to help people succeed. That's all I want. That's enough of that. Getting into the podcast episode. This episode is with Mike Campbell. Mike Campbell is a men's coach and a podcaster and a speaker. I heard about Mike through one of my mates in Canada, Mark Groves. He was talking about people that are in Australia that are in this kind of self-development and personal development space. And I heard that he had this kind of men's group called Beyond the Beers, right? So it's about, getting in touch and building a community with men outside of drinking the beers, right? And not about drinking beers and, giving each other shit and watching sport and all that kind of stuff. It's about, creating genuine connections and having a safe space for men to show up in their, in their truth, in their vulnerability and all that kind of thing. And I started following him since that day. And he shares so much good content, has awesome courses. So I decided to get him on the podcast. And without further ado, this is the episode. And I hope you enjoy. Happy New Year. And again, I look forward to seeing you on the course. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Ant Marino Podcast. Today, I'm joined by a gentleman by the name of Mike Campbell. And Mike Campbell is a men's coach and a host of the Everyday Legends podcast. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Thanks for having me, Ant. Good to be here.
Yeah, man. So I've given, a slight introduction. So for anybody that's listening, would you be able to just go into, who you are, what you do?
Sure. Who I am and what I do. Yeah. So, the simple one is Mike Campbell. And yeah, I'm a men's coach. I suppose there's a few more of us out there these days, but still I tend to get a question that often follows that, which is like, what the fuck is that? What do you do? And so, the simplest way that I can say it is I work with everyday men and getting more from the everyday, pretty simply. A lot of the times that means getting the shit together, i.e. looking at what's going on, where they're at, what isn't working, and what has really kind of like got them in a place where oftentimes there's words, and you've probably heard them as well in your work, like feeling a bit stuck, floating a little bit, some connection to there's more there for me, but bugger if I know how to get it and where to turn, where to start. Or, through to like I'm working and I'm listening to podcasts and I'm reading books and I'm doing some stuff, but it doesn't seem to be happening, or I've reached some kind of a ceiling. So it's very much about, like exploring in a really simple sense, what's holding us back and what is possible for us and actually stepping into that. And, what I find and where my work has kind of come from to my own story, I suppose, to who am I is, I think a lot of people, not necessarily, but my experience has been a lot of people who are perhaps in the work of coaching and personal development, and, to use a term that I resonate with a bit more, helping people get their shit together, might have had some kind of like big thing that they went through at some point in their life. They were going along, had a career, and then something happened and they might shift. Fucking hell, I'm going to do some work myself and then I'm going to get into this work. And that wasn't really me. I think how I've got to this point, 39, has just been like a bit of a slow burn and a slow evolution of me as a person, as a man, and the work that I suppose I've always done, which is to say I went to university in New Zealand. I did a physical education degree, like purely because I kind of stumbled into it. I was that kid who was always going to go to uni, but I had no idea what I was going to do. Didn't necessarily have the most amazing guidance in that. I had the support from my parents, but more so like you just go and do what you want to do. And so I went to uni without any real idea. And I took a physical education paper and I was like, whoa, this is interesting. The human body is fascinating. And so I was like, okay, I'll do this. And when I got to the end of the degree, this was back in like 2004 in New Zealand. So like anyone who became a personal trainer had basically done a degree. So I got to the end of the degree and basically half the people went and became a personal trainer and half went into teaching. And I was like, I don't want to teach. I'll go and be a trainer. I've got this knowledge. But as soon as I started doing it, I found that whilst I'm working with the body, or at least that's what I've learned, I'm working with human behavior. This dude comes, he's got this desire. Cool, here's the stuff for you. Oh, fuck, he didn't do it. Right. And like, they don't do it. And so whilst I was continuing like, upskilling myself on all that technical stuff, I found that for me to, one, have change with these people, and then two, like build a business, which also, the two really needed to feed off each other. I really had to understand how to help these people change their behaviors. And so I would say that it wasn't a real conscious thing for me. It was more just by nature. I'm curious. I want to figure out what the hell's going on. And so when someone came to me with something, I was just naturally going, cool, how do I solve this? So over the years, I kind of started to explore, like, how do I create results for these people, I suppose. And then in amongst all of that, I was, having my own experiences and, stepping into some growth. I moved to the other side of the world from New Zealand and played rugby in Scotland for a while, which was a very interesting period of my life. Not very long, but one of the reasons it was very interesting was because all of a sudden I had a lot of time on my hands. I was basically training and playing footy. And so it was 2006, I think. So, this is before smartphones and essentially having an entire world of distraction in your pocket. And so I spent a lot of time with myself. I spent a lot of time in reflection, and I started to learn about myself. Like, oh man, I'm up in my head a lot, And so it was just a period of like really reflecting and not understanding much, but just seeing there's a bunch of shit here that isn't working for me. I'm 24, I'm single, I'm on the other side of the world, I'm the one with the accent. I want to meet women, I'm terrified. All this stuff was floating around and making me start to ask deeper questions. So this is where I kind of went into a bit of a period of exploring a bit more about myself, a bit more of my own growth and kind of stepping out of a bit of a comfort zone. Even though I'd moved to the other side of the world, I was someone who was very cozy in comfort and stubbornness. And after that, I moved to London, had a bunch of experiences, all this kind of stuff. Eventually found my way back to Australia. And of course, there's plenty of stories in that. But when I got back here, it was when I really started to explore like what I was doing and like, oh, I've been problem solving these people's issues. They want something physical, but it's something emotional. It's mostly men. And so I really started to connect to, there's something common that I'm seeing and that I've, like created solutions for and that I'm doing in terms of my delivery. And what I really understood was I'm supporting men and like getting their shit together and connecting to what they truly want. And the physical has been a bit of a vehicle and avenue for that. And so that's when I kind of really started to dive into why are all these men kind of experiencing the same shit, and me too. It certainly have been historically, and I've been doing a lot of work on myself thanks to that time in Scotland, kicking it off. And that's when I really kind of saw like, oh, there's something going on here with us men, like holy shit, statistics around mental health and suicide and dissatisfaction, all this kind of stuff are very scary. I started speaking to experts, psychologists, in the men's space, all this kind of stuff. Yeah, and I kind of had this like slow burn realization, like we don't really know what it means to be a man anymore. I just remember this kind of thing really ticking over, and I kind of all of a sudden that was my lens. I was seeing all these things pop up that almost reinforced that a bit. The conversations I've been having, my own experiences, and that's what really turned me into, oh, I've kind of been working on that solution unconsciously for a bit. So I got to open that door and really dive in and go down that rabbit hole. And so that's kind of really what led me into, more specifically working with men and understanding themselves and getting more out of life in the simplest sense. So hopefully it's a bit of me, a bit of my story, a bit of how I got to there, to here and there.
Love that. That already answered a couple of questions I had lined up. So that's awesome, mate. I love that. You said before how you started to ask the deeper questions, and I'm curious to know, what were those questions, and kind of what was the work that you were doing on yourself to to learn about, I guess, getting out of your head?
Yeah, well, I mean, so here's a story. I often forget about this, and this is something that plenty of people might have come across. So I lived in this tiny town in Scotland, right? And like basically at a main street. That's kind of what we're dealing with. And I lived in this little pokey cottage thing above like a newsagent's, and there was like 3 pubs next door and then like a charity shop. And I frequented the pubs and I frequented the charity shop. And why? Because in there they sold books. There wasn't a bookstore, in town. And so I just used to go down and I would buy a book for like £1.25, or if it was a pretty new one, might have been £2.50. And I just like was, reading a lot. Some of that being, fiction and shit, and some of them being like a little bit more reflective. I wasn't into self-help or anything like that, apart from like, I helped people with their lives on some level as a trainer before I moved to Scotland, but for me that wasn't it. And so that's where I kind of started to gain access to some different ideas, let's call it. And that coinciding with spending time with myself and then being single and going to these pubs and wanting to meet women, I started to notice like I am fucking terrified of rejection. So that's kind of where I started to like, what's this about? I start asking these questions a bit. Then one day I walk into this charity shop and I see this book called The Game. And I was like, okay, this is cool. There's like 40 books in this entire store. So this looks like this is my next one, because those other ones are horrible or I've read them. And I started reading this book called The Game. Now, for those who don't know, it's a pretty fascinating read by a guy called Neil Strauss, wonderful author. Pretty fucking weird read, when you really get into it, and quite sad, I think, a lot of it. And it's really him exploring the world of pickup artistry, which was quite big and popular, I think, around that kind of time in the early 2000s. And I had no context of this book in the outside world, because I kind of was in this narrow little world. Now, that was a pretty strange book for me to read at that point in my life, because all of a sudden there's these dudes who are like wanting to meet women, and that was me, but the men in this book weren't me. However, the author was a pretty fucking switched on, intelligent guy, and he got like buried into this world, but he also was separate from it. And what kind of coincided for me in a bunch of this was I was able to read a lot of what was happening in the book and take little pieces like, oh, that makes sense, or make connections to my own experiences without being this dude who wanted to dive into the world of pickup artistry. And so that kind of really helped me like start to understand, like, what am I afraid of when it comes to rejection? Like it's rejection, but it's what, you know? So I started asking the deeper questions. What am I actually afraid of? You know, is it that there'll be something wrong with me? She doesn't want me. And so there was just a bunch of things, and my natural curiosity just started kind of spiraling in terms of, in a good way, in terms of, you know, asking questions, reflecting, and then like with some weird things in this book, for example, taking on one of the things that these guys who were like wildly insecure dudes, and you know, I had my insecurities, but I didn't resonate with that level, and being able to like see the shape of that thing and go, oh, I can apply this to myself without it being like desperately needy and manipulative like it might have been in the book. And so all of a sudden, I started to kind of, you know, in a really simple sense, like push my own comfort zone and edge a little bit in terms of, you know, being this dude who was very up in his head and all this kind of stuff. And then I got to tell you the story. I was out in Edinburgh. So I went up to Edinburgh with my flatmate who was in my rugby team. So we went up and we went out to this bar one night, and I had this little thing, and I was like, this is my chance. I'm in the fucking big smoke. You know, I'm gonna go, you know, I'm test out the stuff that I've been learning, in essence, right? Put this information into action. And then there was this one like line, I can't remember, something from the game. And again, so I was like, cool, it's basically a conversation starter, right? Without trying to get, you know, numbers and be the game and all this, I was just like, I want to start a conversation. I'll use that thing. Cool. And I'm standing there with my bro, and there's these two women, and I say this thing, and this woman goes to me, oh, you've read the game, have you? And I mean, like, I had no idea of this book outside this tiny charity shop. So I had no idea that it existed. It was a bestseller or any of this stuff. And like, I don't know, maybe I went white, whatever, but what? No, you know, and I tried to kind of play it down and deny it. And meanwhile, my mate's over here just kind of like sniggering under his breath. And I think it was such like the beautiful, most perfect moment, because it kind of shattered me up in my head and brought me back down to, oh, okay. So it's not about trying to deliver this perfect line, whatever. It's a vehicle to help me relax and be myself more in the moment. And so it was like this thing that I had to go away and reflect on, and, you know, like, but it was the first instance of me like stepping out of the little, you know, comfort zone and trying to like push myself a little bit. And so then from there, it kind of, you know, just slowly evolved and ventured. But I think that's just, again, a story that I don't tell much. I kind of forget about it. But yeah, you know, like in a weird sense, I took a lot from that book, The Game, and that experience. But again, it was those things kind of all coinciding that allowed me and invited me, I suppose, to start poking and prodding and reflecting a bit deeper.
Yeah. I love that story. That is fucking hilarious. But yeah. So
I mean, I can still remember her just saying that. It's just like I love it. It feels like some CCTV footage or something in that bar. Just this dude's face. Anyway.
Hilarious. But yeah, that book, super interesting. I read it when I was, I think, 18 or 19, and it really appealed to me because I had no confidence, right? So, and if anybody hasn't, you know, read the book, there's a lot of manipulation in it, about trying to, you know, get women's attention and, you know, trying to get them to like you, and you're basically not being yourself, you know, unless you're a narcissist and you've always been manipulative, then, you know, you're not being yourself by approaching the women like that. But
yeah, it becomes the game, right? That's the whole point, the game of it. And it becomes quite sad in that sense. They don't actually want connection in the end. They just want a series of numbers. Like that was kind of it. Yeah.
And I didn't even, you know, I didn't know anything about personal development and self-help back when I was 18, you know, but it appealed to me because I had low confidence, and I was like, oh, well, there's this formula that can make it look like I've got confidence, right? But looking back on it now, so I read it, but I never really put the stuff into play because I still didn't have the confidence to be manipulative. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think that's the thing for maybe many people. That was my experience. Was you can tell if something doesn't quite really like align, right? And some people jumped across that line, and some people perhaps didn't.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Looking back at it now, I'm like, oh, that it's so manipulative. I can see why it was so like intriguing to me, because I had such low confidence. And how wrong it actually is. But like you said, there's some good stuff, like the conversation starters, right? Just to get that conversation going.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the thing that I think I really took from it, like at the time, on some level, not as much as now, but I think I connected on some level was, it is a bunch of stuff, because there was the main kind of guys, right, who were like the gods in that world, and they were older and like really sad when you look at it. It was giving tools to insecure men to try and win over insecure women, and so like everyone was kind of being manipulated, and it was a bunch of tools to pretend to have high self-worth, and really it all lacked self-respect and respect for others. But yeah, it's an interesting read.
Yeah,
it would be interesting to read it again now, through a slightly different lens. But yeah, look, it was a bit of a gateway, let's call it, for me.
Yeah, I've actually got a copy of it, and it's been sitting in my closet ever since. So yeah, I might pick it up again and have a read and just see, because Neil Strauss is actually a very I've been looking at some of his work, of recent years, and I'm like, how did he write about this stuff? Like, it just doesn't make sense. But
yeah. Oh, he's a phenomenal author. I think he's written and kind of ghostwritten and co-written a bunch of biographies and so on. But the Truth, I think, is one of his more recent, not that recent, kind of relationship books. But like, having read that, and it's really good, I highly recommend it. I think it starts, in essence, with him going into the world of pickup artistry with the game, and you can kind of see that evolution. So I read that book, when I was much older and had done a lot more work, and I found a lot of, interesting observations for myself, but also in him, the author, as well.
Yeah, awesome. All right, so you mentioned something about we don't, as men, we don't really know what it means to be a man these days, right? Would you like to touch on that, please?
Sure. So I think, like, there's some pretty common ideas in our general narrative, perhaps, about what a man is. And let's say for the vast majority of recent history, up until, let's call it the last 10 years before that, by and large, a lot of boys and males in the Western world grew up with some kind of messaging around their home, around their community, around their environment, in the things that they consumed, in the media, TVs, movies, comic books, all that kind of stuff, where there's lots of nuance, but I think the general kind of idea was that a man is this big, strong, stoic kind of superhero who isn't affected by anything, who has no weaknesses, who can't show any weaknesses, and just gets on and can kind of be everything to everyone, and is unfazed by life, and is cool, calm, collected, doesn't give a shit about many things, and doesn't have emotions. Anything that is slightly feminine is unmanly, right? And so that will differ again from kid to kid, man to man, but that's pretty common out there. And so whatever we are subject to when we grow up is what we absorb, and how we start to get our ideas of what the world is. And if you're a young boy witnessing all of this and consuming all of this, and having these messages kind of passed on and absorbed, and even said explicitly around the home and so on, then you start to form the idea that that's what a man is, therefore that's what I need to be. And anything in you that is different to that kind of starts to get pushed away, or potentially like there's a rejection of that. And so we kind of fling to the other side, very hyper emotional, hypersensitive, very feminine type boy, which is not good nor bad. It might be very specific and appropriate to the individual, but we kind of have this very simple, narrow idea of what a man is. Now, I would say that there's some real truth in a bunch of those things, strong and capable provider, these kind of things, but it's very narrow. And like a man is a human. And so, a human has emotional experiences, has a breadth of traits and qualities and experiences and all sorts. And so when we get this just such strong and consistent messaging about, what we need to be, what we should be as a man, it, again, as I said before, it kind of shuts off or invites us to shut off anything that isn't in there. And what we're starting to do is reject part of ourselves. And, we're starting to lose part of ourselves. And I think what we end up seeing in a lot of men is we get to a point where we're not entirely sure, well, I'm getting that this is what I need to be, but some of that isn't me. Some of that isn't aligning. And so either I'm in rejection of that and think, oh, I'm not good enough, I'm not man enough, or I feel like, where's my place in the world? Because some of that isn't quite fitting. But what we become very good at is playing the part of that, or our version of that, the strong, capable, successful dude. And if you look at the game, the man who can earn money and beat a lot of women, right? And that, again, there's a lot of elements of accuracy in there, but it's so narrow. And so we end up with a lot of men just, floating around going, well, who the fuck am I supposed to be then? I'm gonna keep up this version because that's the one that feels safe. Yeah. Then I might be approved of, and then I might get respect and so on. But I'm still under the surface going, right? And so one of the more common things that I hear from a lot of guys is like, you might look at my life and it might seem like it's all fine and good and successful and great on the outside, but on the inside, it's very different. So you get, again, I think there's a shitload of nuance to it and how it all comes about. But I think that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Yeah. Something that came up for me was like, we in the modern world, we're not kind of taught how to be a man, but in ancient cultures, boys would have been integrated into manhood through from the elderly, right? Being taught this is what it means to be a man and all that kind of stuff. And we don't have that now, especially with a lot of, parents separating and all that kind of stuff. And speaking from my experience, I love my dad, and he did his best to try and, teach what he thought was meant to be right. But at the same time, he only had us every second weekend, right? For 2 days. So he didn't want to be trying to, teach all this stuff and try and change us in a way, when he just wanted to spend good quality time with us. Do you know what I mean? So it was super
absolutely hard. Yeah. And, that really comes back to modeling, right? Which is obviously one part of everything that I discussed. So, we will model on what is modeled to us. And, especially now, we have so many pieces of information and data come across our faces every day, right? About life and who you should be and how you should be and so on, that, let's place it in the eyes of a young boy. Your father figure, right? Your main modeling for what a man is, may, really fall as a drop into the ocean of a bunch of ideas and messages that come at you. And so, of course, as you say, like in your situation, if you then place that to just 2, days across a week or every second weekend, that's hard, right? And again, like our parents and our fathers and everyone are only doing what they have been modeled. And so obviously it goes on like that. But, now and maybe for the last little while, we have kind of the converse side of that, expectations about who you should be, which is, well, men should be emotional and we should open up, right? And we should step back and equality and all these things that, again, have so much validity to them and also muddy the fuck out of the waters a whole lot. Yeah. Hold on. So should I be strong and stoic and provide for my family and bring home the bacon, or should I step back and let my wife do that? Or should I be emotional? Should I be crying more? I feel like I hear about how, and like all of a sudden it kind of creates this tension on both sides, right? Reinforces that, like, who the fuck and how the fuck am I supposed to be? And that can be quite challenging. And this is one of the things, I get so much communication from women, which is wonderful because most of it is like, I want to understand the men in my life. And I love that. Because fuck, that's what we need. Just like men, hey, we get to sit down and understand, a woman's perspective, like massively, especially if you look at things right now, like in the US with the Texas abortion law and so on. But what I often find when I talk to women about this stuff is that they haven't actually sat down and thought about what the life of their man might have been like through his lived experiences, which of course is often what they're wanting us to do. And again, they encourage me to do that. And when you start to talk about these things, they start to go like, holy shit, that sounds hard. Like that sounds like that has been a very hard life to live up to those massive expectations about what you should be as a man. And so that can be very challenging and hard work to try and declutter all that, like get it out of the way and like find, who you are beneath that, the man beneath all the armor, all the ideas, all the expectations.
Yeah. And I know there's not going to be a wrong and a right answer to what I'm about to ask, but what do you think it means to be a man?
Well, probably not too many surprises. I've been asked that question a bit or something like it. The best thing that I can really come to is, well, certainly this is where I start, and that's to be your own man.
Yeah.
And so what that hopefully invites is, well, what is that for me? And my idea with that is an invitation to, as I said before, like declutter all of the stuff that I've maybe absorbed and taken on board and inherited, and perhaps, attached to parts of my identity about who I think and I need to be and what I think it means to be a man. And therefore I can kind of come back to like a clean slate. I got a clear whiteboard in front of me. Okay, so who am I and who do I want to be, like in terms of being me and my own man? So then perhaps we might be able to bring in ideas of, let's call it traits that speak to, the masculine, which is essentially represented in physical form in men in part, because of obviously we also have the feminine. So that's kind of where I come back to. Because then we can start to see things like, provider, protector, looking at our evolutionary roots of the hunter. And then also father. What is a father? He's also someone who needs to care for a child. So, there's the muscle, the brawn, the provide, the protect, and there's the caring and the heart, right? And then there's the head, the planning. So there's all these different elements, but my idea essentially in inviting a man to go, well, being your own man is, so then look at all of that, your breadth and what is available to you, and then find your place. So that's kind of how I answer that. And then the one simple extension beyond that, or maybe not that simple as this, as you said before, and my podcast is the Everyday Legends, and it's my coaching program, Everyday Legends Academy. For me, that's a term that I have kind of like bastardized from something that I have taken on board from the ancient Greeks, and they had this term called Zeus energy. And Zeus energy incorporated, and I'm going to do my best to remember this: intelligence, robust health, compassionate decisiveness, goodwill, and generous leadership. And the idea behind that was that it was male authority accepted for the sake of the community. And so those things there, I think about, I read, and I go, that to me sums up things. I feel like that is something that every man can inhabit and embody and make his own. Because of course, one simple formula for each man, if this is what a man is, doesn't speak to the breadth, and across humanity. But for me, those are traits that every man can kind of take on board and give his own flavor. And so that's something that I really connect to. And it's kind of the thing that I, hold at the center of like this term, Everyday Legend, my modern, bastardization of that term.
Yeah, love that, mate. Love that. Something that stood out to me there was decisiveness. And in my past, and I still do struggle with it, is decisiveness. And Yeah. Could you explain a little bit more about, you know, what decisiveness would mean to you?
Yeah. So, and well, first of all, I'll go specifically to the term. It was compassionate decisiveness, and I think that that's a very important, you know, kind of truck and trailer word there, because I think in more immature and adolescent and ineffective forms of masculinity that we have maybe seen dominate the world for quite some time, is we might see a lot of decisiveness that doesn't have compassion, that there is an expense, that there's this kind of human expenditure, that it's climbing the ladder, it's, winning at the cost of others, it's this kind of zero-sum game type thing to protect myself and advance and succeed. And again, if you link back to before, it's pretty easy to see why a lot of men live that life, because they've been made to believe that that's who you need to be to have any kind of worth in the world, right? So compassionate decisiveness, I think, is very important, because it invites decisiveness with consideration for myself and for those who are also impacted in the decision, right? So that, for me, is a very, very important term that comes along with decisiveness. Now, but it's still also about being decisive, right? And so one of the things that I find a lot of men who I work with who maybe do or have struggled with decisiveness is, we get into this kind of spin of overthinking and worst case scenario kind of catastrophizing, and we're worried about what if it's the wrong decision, or what if it doesn't go right, or what if I fail. And here's something that I'll touch on really quickly on that, is that we often kind of spin in those thoughts, but we never actually fucking sit and think about them and detail them. What if it does go wrong? What if I fail? What if you fail? Actually sit down and write out those things. But when we just ask the questions like that and never address them, it's almost like it's rhetorical. And what we're actually saying is, instead of what if I fail, I don't want to fail. And that's a more accurate term. So first of all, actually ask the fucking question and detail it. Then I think one of the things that so many men struggle with in terms of decisiveness is, I'm often looking for the world to make my decisions for me. Then I can jump on the back of it and go, okay, cool, right? I feel more secure because it's already, kind of something or the world or some other people have made my mind up for me. And so what that kind of is speaking to for me, and I find this in a lot of the men that I work with, is, again, presents as a lack of decisiveness, but what it really speaks to is a lack of self-awareness. And when we can actually figure out, who are you? Again, once we take off all of that shit that was cluttering us, as we discussed earlier, who you think you need to be, we can start to kind of get back to the foundation of who is Ant? What do you care about? What are your values? What do you want for yourself and your life? And when we can kind of start to get that foundation and your value system and what you give a shit about, then we can expand on those, Ant values adventure. Cool. What does that look like? Expand upon it for you. And all of a sudden we start to have the playbook. And knowing yourself with this level of clarity, I think very simply brings confidence, right? Because we're often terrified, as we said before, of things not going right. So it's I'm not confident. Confident means I need clarity and I need competence. And so if you can get clarity in yourself and then live that, you become more competent at being yourself, as fucking weird as it sounds. All of a sudden, it becomes so much easier to make decisions.
Yeah. Because
I'm willing to make the decisions for me, because I know what I want. I know what I'm about. And so when I've got that lack of willingness to make decisions, right, that indecisiveness, and I'm kind of waiting for the world to decide for me, it's like I'm a leaf in the wind. I'm just ready to be blown any way the wind wants to blow me. And that's unsettling, right? I'm not settled. And so the invitation is to ground yourself. And so obviously bringing in that idea of compassionate decisiveness, right? For me, coming back to this term, Zeus energy, I said male authority accepted for the sake of the community. So one of the things that I think is very paramount to any human, and obviously I'll talk through the lens of men, is being a useful fucking human. And so I'm living the world coming from a place of self-respect, and obviously my own experience, but I'm also going, how can I be of use to those around me? Because when we fundamentally evolved as humans, being a useful member of a tribe, of a small band of humans, was integral. If you didn't have a use, what use were you, right? So I think that's something that's so human. And so therefore that invites that compassionate decisiveness. How am I making decisions for me and those around me? How will this impact us, right? A bit of consideration and a bit of compassion for what that result might lead to. And also for the guys who are like incredibly indecisive and never make decisions and wait for the world to make the decision for them. Compassionate decisiveness is also allowing yourself to make a decision and it not be right. Like just learn as you go, mate.
Yeah.
Exactly. Make a decision and make it right by stepping towards it and then going, you know what, if it doesn't go the way I really want it to, then I'll learn the lesson and I'll make a new decision and I'll move and I'll move and I'll move. Exactly. So it's also having that bit of compassion for yourself in that sense.
Yeah, for sure. And I love that. I shared something similar on my Instagram a couple of weeks ago, and it was like, there's no wrong decision except for indecision, because if you make a decision, right, it leads you to somewhere. And if it's wrong, it's not actually wrong, because then it leads you to the next thing, right? But if you just stay in one spot, then you'll never know and you'll be stuck, right? And
the decision that you could have made will be way in the future. If you think about that, like staying in a spot, it's like, oh, there was the decision up there. You can't catch that decision. It's fucking gone, right? And now you're behind. Oh, right. And of course, that's often a spin for the guys. Shoulda, coulda, woulda. It's like, just fucking start.
Yeah, 100%, man. And I also love what you talked about, how you spoke about clarity and competence equals, confidence. And that really resonates hard with me, and something that I've kind of worked on the last couple of years is getting clarity on what I'm doing. Really like, getting clarity on what I'm actually doing in this world, who am I showing up for, etc. And then, being scared of how I'm going to do it, but building the confidence to do it through competence. So, the more you do it, right, the more you're like, oh, I'm getting better at this, right? I feel competent. And then now I'm feeling confidence. Yeah.
Yeah. And, we're often sitting there waiting for confidence to just like, poof, be bestowed upon us. And now I can do the challenging thing. But it's like, no, then it's not challenging. So, like growth is asking us to grow into it. Right. And we're never going to be sprinkled with, magical confidence dust. You slowly progress. And this is something that I learned, in my days as a personal trainer. Like progressive overload is one of the most simple principles, right? Like if you can squat 20 kilos and you want to squat 100 kilos, then you don't throw 100 kilos on the bar. Are you fucking stupid? You go 25 and you have a spotter, and there's micro tears in the muscles and they adapt and grow and get stronger. And that's you. But it just happens in many, many different ways. Tougher conversations, whatever it is.
Yeah, exactly. I always say that to people. And I'm like, you don't just fucking deadlift 500 kilos straight away. Like you work up to it. And it's the same with setting boundaries and having vulnerable conversations, all that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
And you spoke about values and living in alignment with that. And you said adventure because that's one of my highest values, right? And I was thinking about something that I've been going through in my life about not making a decision, so being undecisive. And we spoke before we started recording, and it was about how I'm moving to Queensland, right? I've been thinking about moving to Queensland for 6 months, right? And I'm renting a house down here in Safety Beach, and I've got it set up. I've got my podcast set up. Everything's comfortable. Like everything's cushy, right? So
and it's called Safety Beach. I don't know if you missed the irony there. But...
Oh yeah. Oh, that's hilarious. It's safety. Yeah, exactly. So I wasn't making a decision because like I didn't need to, because it was kind of like safe here, right? But then my lease expired and I was like, I have to make a decision now. Like, do I stay and extend my lease, or do I go to Queensland? Right. And I'm like, well, I'm going to Queensland because like, that's what I've been wanting to do. And I could have made this decision fucking 6 months ago. Right. But I didn't, because I can be undecisive sometimes.
Yeah. And, the lease helps you make that decision, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But if I had just followed my values, which is adventure, that is a big adventure for me. Right. So yeah, because I've also felt like a little bit lost the last kind of couple of months. And I think by not following that value of adventure, I started to feel lost and kind of felt like I was floating a little bit. So yeah, I loved how you touched on that.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Our values are, they're the compass. And, I was talking about this with some of my coaching guys the other day, like, it's so important that we have them. But what a values is not is a list of words on a piece of paper. Sweet ass, got it, cool, right? They are lived. And so, we sit down and we reflect and we think, what do I value? And we brainstorm and we brain dump down and we get some ideas and then we put them into practice. And you experiment with them and then you define them. Like, what is adventure for me? Like I have a very high value of like awe and wonder. I love that. And one of the ways that I often would like to meet that is, travel and experiences and new places, different languages. And well, that's pretty fucking hard at the moment.
Yeah.
But there's other ways I can still live out that value. And one of the ways, when I connect to it and also when I think back to my like entire life, is I've always been fascinated with things like the Guinness Book of Records, and trivia. Like I've always had trivia books, and that is like a really simple way, like in a daily way that I get to live that value, just being taken to a little moment. But the thing about values is they got to be lived, they got to be refined and tested and put through the ringer a little bit. And then if you think back to the idea of the compass to help us set the direction. So if I'm going to start off on a big journey, before I had Google Maps, I'm going to pull out the compass, right? I'm going to help direct my journey. That's very important to directing the journey. Otherwise, I don't know which way to step and I'll stay in indecision. But then as I go on in that journey, you might call it life, it would be ludicrous if I never took the compass out of my bag again. Like I have to pull that out and make sure I'm on the right course and help me direct my life and make decisions. And then go, oh, maybe the course has been updated. Maybe there's been a fucking town built in the way and I need to redirect. Right. So we've got to keep pulling out our values and exploring them again, like flushing them out, testing them, reflecting on them, and helping us direct. And that's really what they get to be, is that foundation to direct our lives and, like, in a very simple sense, make decisions.
Yeah, love that. So I did want to take it kind of right back to the start, and it was when you were talking about, being a men's coach, and I wanted to know, what is the biggest thing that you see come up with men, or with working with men?
Well, I suppose there's two ways we could go with that. One is, like, what is maybe like in terms of a challenge, or something like that, challenge, problem, issue. And then perhaps the other side is like what they want. And so perhaps I'll answer something that might speak to both of those. So I think, and maybe I kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, like the thing that comes up for me right now, because there's 10 billion things, right? We could always think of it, there's lots of things, and there's so many commonalities, And so one of the things that actually speaks to, for me, and in answering the question, is so many guys think that I've got this shit that isn't working, maybe back to all that stuff before, like, this is who I think I need to be, but it's not me, but I'll put on the mask and I'll live that life, but it's not fulfilling. And we look at everyone else's masks and facades and armors and we think, see, they're sorted. They don't have shit. I'm just the one experiencing this shit. So often I see for so many guys that is a block to doing anything, is I think I'm the only one who's got shit, or shit like mine. And look at all my mates and the men that I witness and so on, they haven't got shit, right? And they've got these lives, and social media and so on tends to perpetuate that a little bit. And so we don't do anything. we are still stuck behind those ideas of what a man is. And that old ideal, a man is not someone who asks for help or says, hey, I've got all this stuff that isn't working for me and it feels really shit and hard and tough. It feels like weakness. Well, you'd be fucking ostracized for that. Or at least that's what we have believed, right? So I think that's something that's very central to it, because what that then leads to is I don't really allow myself to explore it. What is my shit? What is going on here? You know what? I'll just park that in the back. I'll put that in a dark closet. Let's just not address that. You know what? Let's just don't bother with it. But of course, it's in the closet. Every time you go home, you're like, oh, that fucking thing again. Just don't turn the light on. Yeah. So, I think there's this real position that we end up in where we know there's something that we could perhaps need to address, but it feels fucking terrifying to do it, and perhaps to admit that it might be there, and to admit that I might need some help around it. So we never get started. Of course, if we do, then it's like wildly vulnerable. How do I start? Because if I open myself up and my vulnerabilities, I could be, quote unquote, wounded or injured, right? Someone could laugh at me, judge me, take advantage of me, reject me, whatever. And then in terms of like what's common for perhaps what guys want, I think this is where this links, is that we want more and different and better, but we don't know what it is, because we haven't opened the closet and looked at, well, what's the big fucking scary thing that we haven't addressed yet? Because that's impacting us, even knowing what we want, knowing what is possible for us. So perhaps one of the themes, maybe through all of that, is back to something that we said before, which is a lack of clarity, a lack of self-awareness. Not really knowing yourself and who you are and what you want, and the shit that's in the way of you, becoming the man that you want to and can become. Let's say that.
Yeah, love it. And if you were to give some advice on how a man could start, finding that self-awareness and looking into the closet and all that kind of stuff, where would he start?
So I know I said the closet. As soon as you said that, now I'm like taken back to, if anyone watches it, the South Park episode with Tom Cruise in the closet. It's hilarious. Anyway, your baggage in the closet. Okay, so where would he start? Okay, so let's go super practical, and maybe let's circle back to my own story that I was sharing earlier when I was in Scotland, and I ended up spending quite a bit of time with myself. Now, that's an important differentiation that I think we make. The difference between spending time by yourself and spending time with yourself. Like, a lot of us will spend time by ourselves, but it's quite possibly filled with the phone, something that actually stops us being alone with ourselves, with our thoughts, with our feelings, with our experiences. And so one of the things that we're talking about here, and I fundamentally believe it, is that, a lot of men need both self-awareness and also guidance. We spoke about it earlier, right? Like, what is possible for me? What is healthy, mature, masculinity and manhood, through modeling and eldership and so on. But self-awareness is yours. So sit the fuck down and spend some time with yourself. So here's a simple challenge that I set. Every guy that comes into my program, 6-month program, so I invite everyone to set a challenge for themselves that they think is scary and big and is relevant for them. And I, spoiler alert, give everyone the same challenge, which is for every day of this program, you're going to spend 15 minutes alone with yourself, with your thoughts and your feelings. That's it. You can have a pad and pen, but to start with, it's not a writing exercise, it's just a sitting. It's not a walking exercise, like sit down. Walking is a thing. It's an activity. It's a doing. The idea and the invitation is this is to be with yourself. So in that, we might start to have some fucking horrible thoughts come up. All sorts of daunting shit and some unpleasant feelings. And guess what? Everyone does. It's okay. Allow them to come and go. You are the earth, and that is the clouds and the weather. Let it come and go and notice it. And then with that sitting with yourself practice, I would invite guys to start a journal practice, which is very simple. Like, it might even happen after that sitting. And that is write down what you're feeling mentally, emotionally, and physically. Create a practice of tuning into what you're experiencing. And those alone across time will build some understanding of yourself and what you're going through and what you're experiencing, and can help you start to guide, your life a little bit. But that's something that's super simple. For some guys, not easy at all. It's like daunting to
Mm.
sit with your thoughts and your feelings. But if you want to know yourself better, then you got to sit down and get to know yourself. It's as simple as that.
Mm. That's why so many dudes drink, 10 beers a night, because they don't want to sit with that shit.
Yeah, and we take our phone to the shitter. We're with someone in a cafe, let's say, and they go to the bathroom. We get our phone out. There's any number of, a phone is an easy tool to throw under the bus, but it's a pretty common one. But there's any number of things that we will use, to distract. And here's another thing that I'll bring into that. One of the things that I often hear, and as a very common desire and want for men, is something that might equate to like some more peace, like feeling peace within myself. And what that can often speak to is like not having to have such a fucking busy life and a busy head. And so then we look at our behaviors, and the moment a little bit of time and space comes, we fill it with a phone, something. So stop filling moments and like literally allow peace in that moment, even though, of course, it might not be that peaceful in your head, but that's a practice to work on.
Yeah. Love it, mate. Thank you very much. So if anybody wants to find out more about you, where can they find you?
Yeah. So, Mike Campbell is my name, reasonably common name. So I don't really tend to own Google. After the guitarist for Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers tends to own that one. But look, find me, mikecampbell.com.au. I've actually got a new website launching pretty soon, or a significant update. And then, on Instagram, Mike Campbell MC. Come and say hello, ask questions. Always happy to hear questions and support where I can. And, that's where everything else is.
Yeah. And Mike puts out a lot of good content on his Instagram, so be sure to follow that. And one last thing, do you have any programs that you want to share with people, anything like that? Do you have any offers?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a bunch of things you can find on my website. I do have a mini course for men called the Better Partner Project, which is really about helping men be their best in relationships, and then actually create like same page, connected, fun, and easy partnerships. So we're doing a re-release of that soon. Obviously, don't know when this will come out, but you can go and check that out on my Instagram. You'll find all that stuff as well.
Awesome. So yeah, guys, if anything resonates there, be sure to check out Mike, follow him, hit him up. And thank you everybody for listening. And thank you very much, Mike, for coming on.
Thanks for having me. It's fun to chat, and thank you everyone for listening. Yeah.